All right, welcome hackers to Hack Summer 21 Session 2. My name is Taggart, and tonight you are in for a treat. We are undertaking one of the most requested topics on the stream in general, but certainly for this Hack Summer course, we are talking about the Vim text editor. So, if you've touched Linux at all or seen any Linux demos, you've probably heard or seen about the Vim text editor, but a lot of people really have some real challenges with Vim. And I, for a long time, was one of them. Angel, good to see you. Orbital, good to see you. I definitely was one of those people who had a lot of trouble with the Vim text editor. And part of the reason why is because it's such an older idea. So we're going to go through Vim. We're going to take away all of the fear from using the Vim text editor and show what a powerful tool it can be. Now, we're going to show how to use it for basic text editing, for also and for even for code writing, things like that. But because this stream is sort of security flavored, of course, we're also going to show how it can be really, really useful in security contexts as well. Synat Codes, good to see you. So before we get started, a couple of disclaimers, because whenever we have the conversation about Vim or any text editor, right, or any tech really, but certainly text editors, right, code editors, IDEs, things like that in this tech sector, it becomes holy war, and I want to stop that. So here's why to use Vim in general, right? You may not like it after this session, that's totally fine. You may love it, that's great. I've really found an appreciation for it, but I don't use it all the time. But here's the why for using Vim. Because it's there. It's a very, very powerful tool, and on most Linux distributions, VI or Vim is present on the system and may already be configured as the default text editor for other applications like Git. So learning how to use Vim automatically makes you more facile, more fluent on the Linux operating system that you're navigating. So that's a huge part of it for me. It's already there, it's ready for you to use, so you might as well take advantage of it. And because of its built-in tools, it can have a little bit more flexibility for you, a lot more capability for you than some of the other text editors that are built in, like Nano. Nothing against Nano or Pico. If you use those and you use them to good effect, that's fantastic. Absolutely no trouble with that. But I really do think that Vim, because of the way that it's designed and what it can do, can become essentially a force multiplier for you. Now, you don't have to join a cult, right? You don't have to use Vim for everything. You don't have to you don't have to espouse Vim's virtues to other people to use it. You can just use it. It's a tool, right? If you like the way the wrench works, use the wrench. If you don't, that's totally fine. And I'm also going to put a quick message out there to the mostly dudes who do this. Just stop. Stop trying to convince everybody else that your thing is best and that everyone else should use it, and if they don't, they're wrong. It's a really dumb tribal thing that we just have like hardwired into us from an early age, right? My sports team is better than your team. This is the best car, like whatever it is. Just stop. Just stop. Right? Everybody can have their thing. If it works, it works. That's really what matters. So we're going to learn how to use this tool, and then what you do with it from then on, that's on you. And yeah, knowing how to use a tool is always better than fearing it, right? When I was in school, we still had shop class. It was called, you know what? It was called like technology education, now that I think about it, which is kind of funny at this point. But it was, you know, like carpentry, woodworking, things like that. And you know, people were terrified of the bandsaw when you start using it, right? This is massive, you know, not spinning, but I guess moving blade, right? That is designed to cut easily through wood. I had the advantage of growing up with a lot of woodworkers, so I was familiar with the bandsaw, but it was interesting watching people learn how to use it safely and, you know, over the course of the year in this class, right? 13-year-olds becoming all of a sudden really, really capable of using the bandsaw and not, you know, trepidatious about doing so. Angel says that the fear has stopped me from taking time to learn Vim. So there's fear, and I would also say that there's fear from two sides, right? It's probably not just the fear of the technology, but it's also the fear of kind of like the baggage that comes with it. Because asking for help with some of this stuff is really, really intimidating. Especially for things that are like really graybeardy, like Vim, where there are a whole bunch of experts, and you're probably going to get overwhelmed with knowledge. And again, quick aside, like if you're a a non cishet guy asking for help with this, right, you have to weigh the value of the question against the wave of mansplaining that you're going to get if you ask the question. That's totally understood. So this is a space where we're going to do away with all of that. We are just going to provide some information, right? We're all supportive here. There are absolutely no dumb questions. If you have a question, please ask it. There will be the best attempt to answer it possible, and the minimum amount of um, condescension. So that's kind of where we're starting. Now, one of the things that probably we're going to get into using Vim in just a second, but a couple more slides just of some background. One of the things that confuses most people about Vim when you start it up is that when you open Vim, it's not like you can just start typing like literally every other text editor you've ever used. It starts up in a different mode that is not designed for entering text. It's designed for review, really. And that's very, very confusing, because if you just open Vim and you expect it to start working like a text editor, you're going to get really, really messed up. And there's no help, there's no user interface, there's no graphical user interface. So it's totally opaque as to how it works. And then you start pressing some keys and some weird things happen. You have no idea. And then, of course, you get into the situation that everyone gets into, is like, how do I get out of this thing? I don't know how to quit Vim. So we're going to take care of all of that tonight. But the most important thing to know about basic Vim usage is that it is a modal editor. It has more than one mode, which is different than the way that most of the text editors that you're used to operate. That added complexity gives Vim a lot of extra power, but a much steeper learning curve. And that's what we need to get over to start using Vim. So the Vim modes that you need to be concerned with, first of all, is the normal mode. And that's really what you open in. It's kind of an entryway mode. It's not really good at any one thing. It's kind of a transitional state between other modes. From there, you can enter insert mode, which is typing text. You can also enter visual mode, which is, think of that as like highlighting, right? Clicking and dragging and selecting text. You can enter command mode, which is how you enter commands to Vim and configure it and select options, things like that. And then going back into normal mode. There's also technically a replace mode, but it's so contextual that I didn't feel like it was worth a list. Angel asks, do you know why it's in normal mode by default instead of editing? Safety. Yes. It is in that because you need to make the conscious choice to start making changes to the text buffer. Which, thank you so much for that segue into the next point, which is that Vim operates on buffers of text, right? And all text editors do, but you may hear the term buffer more often when we're talking about Vim, and I want to make sure that that concept is familiar to everybody before we move forward. So a buffer is just essentially the text that's currently loaded into the editor. You can have multiple Vim buffers, right? We're going to even show how you can open multiple windows inside of Vim, or even multiple tabs. Vim has those capabilities out of the box, even though they're not immediately apparent. All right. So we're going to start. Let's get over to our terminal. And as a reminder, let me bring up my terminal here. And I'm in my virtual machine. Now, if you're just joining us for the first time, as a reminder, we have our VirtualBox machine that we set up in the first session, and I highly recommend that that's what you're using, and we're SSH'd into it from our host machine's terminal, right? So that's how I have a much better terminal to work with, rather than typing into the VirtualBox window. I don't want to do that just because it doesn't give me a whole lot of options, right? and I want my better terminal experience. So that's why I'm SSH'd into it this way. And I'm in my home folder. There are a few things that we'll download later, but for now I'm just here. And I'm going to just open Vim and by typing Vim. And this is what we'll see. And I'm in normal mode right now. This is what it looks like. And it's interesting the first time everybody opens Vim, just because people don't know what just happened, right? It took over your whole terminal. You lost your command prompt. We're not really used to seeing this happen. But don't worry, you're in good hands. We're going to learn exactly how to use this. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to type some text. So let me bring up my keyboard overlay so we can see how this works. Yes, I'm very excited for this. I just got this for this session. So we have the keyboard overlay, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to press the I key. Notice that with the after I press the I key, down at the bottom here, it shows me that I'm in insert mode. If I press the escape key, I'm back into normal mode. That escape key is your best friend in Vim. It gets you back into normal mode out of whatever weird place you've gotten to, right? And a lot of people remap the caps lock key to escape for that reason if they're heavy Vim users, especially if you're a Vim user on a modern Mac, because what does a modern Mac have that makes the escape key a little bit less convenient to use? I guess they've gotten rid of it in the latest versions, but the touch bar it takes over where the escape key is, right? And they give you a virtual. Yeah, Neon, they made it part of the touch bar for the touch bar edition Max. And there was literally a situation where someone had a crashed touch bar, and so they could not exit Vim because their escape key didn't exist. They closed the terminal window, but they couldn't exit Vim properly because their escape key was not just software which had crashed. Okay, so we'll press I to get into insert mode, and we can just type some text. Type whatever you want. Line breaks. Working as expected, right? This is just totally, normal typing stuff, right? Did anybody do Mavis Beacon when they were kids? I'm getting to that age where I feel like I'm dating myself. Like I feel like I'm throwing out references that like a shrinking share of people I talk to will get. But yeah, Mavis Beacon, it was important for people of a certain age. That, and I really feel like people of my generation uh, definitely learned how to type learned how to type properly from Mavis Beacon, but learned how to type quickly by holding multiple conversations simultaneously on AOL Instant Messenger. That was our experience as youths on dial-up internet. Okay. Um, I feel like a little bit of, throwback is appropriate if we're using the Vim text editor. Okay, IRC. You were leader than I was, for sure. Um, okay, so let's press escape here. And now I'm back into normal mode. And how do we navigate text, right? This is something that we would do in any other text editor. Now, can you use the arrow keys? Absolutely. But I would like you to refrain from using the arrow keys to navigate, just to move the cursor back and forth. The other way that you use the cursor is with the H, the, uh, the, well, we'll start here. So the H and L go left and right. Yeah, don't do control right. I would basically leave off control stuff. It'll have unexpected consequences in Vim. And we'll learn about some of those, but so H is left, L is right, J is down, and K is up. And you might think that's pretty weird. Control Byte says, fairly new to Vim, 2 months, been playing HJK. I'll sneak really up my movement proficiency. There's a game online that I'll show you at the end that is sort of like, it's like an adventure game. It's like a platformer, but you use Vim keys to navigate. We'll show that at the end. Okay, but you might be wondering why on earth that is true. Why are those the keys? And the reason, let me turn off the keyboard overlay. The reason those keys are the arrow keys is because of legacy. Before arrow keys were invented, look at that. The H, J, K, and L keys were in fact the arrow keys. And if you ever have opportunity to look at some older keyboards, you may see exactly this. And that's why. So if you think about it, it's pretty efficient once you get used to it, because if your fingers are supposed to be on that home row, right? That's what those little knobs on the F and J key are for. That's where your index fingers go. Then you have your arrow keys right under your fingertips without having to move your hand over to the arrow keys. So that's kind of why they're there. All right. Oh God, I gotta change the Chiron. We're not doing a web app pen test today. That's better. Okay. So we know how to navigate, right? We've got J, K, H. Let's get that keyboard overlay back. J, K, H, and L. Let's also get some music back. I just realized that it was just me. Yeah, there we go. All right. What's next? I'm looking for my... There we go. Okay, so we've navigated. Now let's talk a little bit about how to navigate through more text and more efficiently. To do that, you can use the arrow keys, Angel. But to do that, we're going to get a little bit more text. And we're going to do copying and pasting. I'm going to get some more text. Now, everybody knows about lorem ipsum, and lorem ipsum is great, but there is a better option, which is Jeffsum.com. And what Jeffsum.com does is it just gives you as many paragraphs of Jeff Goldblum quotes as you want. And that's exactly what I'm going to be using here. All right, so Control-C over to my window here and coming down to the bottom. Now, while we're talking about editing, so I will put me in insert mode, but O will put me in insert mode on the next line. Right, so I just remember that because it's I and then O is right next to it. Right, so O will put me on the next line. And then to paste, if I do Control V, it won't work, but Control Shift V will work just fine. So now I have a whole bunch of text. And I just pressed Escape to get out of that mode. Okay. Now, I'm going to go all the way. My cursor is now at basically the bottom of the buffer, and I can tell that because of the UI down here. It tells me this. So first of all, this is the line number, and this is the column, or the row number, basically, and this is the column number, meaning how many characters over in the line I am. And you may have seen an error message in Python or something else like that that says like line something, colon, and then another number. That other number is the column number. So how many characters into the line are you? And that's really, really helpful to just have that available there. So if I move my cursor over with the H key a little bit more, right, you can see that number changing. It also tells me that I'm at the bottom of the buffer. If I were to move up with the K key, right, that bottom should disappear. There we go, yeah. Or it's the paging, right? So if I go up to the top of the pages, then I lose that bottom. It tells me, in fact, that I'm at the top. Now, if I wanted to quickly move from the top to the bottom, I have a couple of options. Obviously, the page up. Sorry about those dings. I'll turn those off. Let me switch over to no sounds as my... There we go. No more horrible dings. Now, if I can use page up and page down, of course, but I also have key presses that work for me to get to the top and the bottom as well. This is where the G key comes in. The G key is the go key. The go key. And hey, Husky, welcome. You have not missed much. We've just, although something very important that you did miss was Jeffsum.com, right? Where we're using Jeffsum to get filler text, which is just Jeff Goldblum quotes, as many paragraphs of Jeff Goldblum as we can handle. That's what we're using for our sample text for the moment. I'm going to move this down just a little bit. Okay. So if I want to get to the very top of my buffer, I would do GG will take me to the very top, right? So if I'm all the way at the bottom, and I go GG, I'm back up at the top. If I want to get all the way to the bottom, capital G or Shift G will take me there. So really easy to get to the top and the bottom just using Shift G and GG. We can also use the G key with a number prefix to get to a different line. But you might think, well, wait, how do we do lines? We'll find out in a second. But let's say I wanted to get to the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth line. I would do 4GG, and now you see my cursor went down to the fourth line. If I want to do the fifth line, I would do 5GG, and now I'm on the fifth line. That's not all. We have other really, really quick ways of moving between text. So, for example, I have the E key, which will take me to the end of words. It's a little messed up because of the zooming, but it's taking me to the end of words. 5 lines thingy? Yep, absolutely. So, the G key is really, really important. It's the go key. If I want to go to a specific line, let's say I want to go to the 5th line, I would press the 5 key, and then G, and then G again. That takes me to the 5th line. We're going to learn how to look for help on different commands really, really quickly. Really, really soon. But yeah, so E will take you to the end of a word, and B will take you to the beginning of a word, right? Moving back. So E moves forward, skipping to the ends of words, whereas B, basically space separations, right? But B takes you backwards towards the beginning of words. So if I want to quickly move through a line, I often will use E and B just to move my cursor around that way. There's one other really cool navigation, well, let's say two. There's 2 other cool navigation tricks that I want to show you before we get into some easier commands and learning how to look up help. And again, we're still in normal mode, right? We're not in insert mode. This is just for moving the cursor to where we want it. The curly braces, right? So Shift and the bracket keys, which aren't highlighting, I don't think. But these keys here will actually move paragraphs. So holding down the shift key and using the curly braces, skip me down by paragraphs and skip back up by paragraphs. That's really handy if I'm doing text. Now, I'll also say this. The brackets will also work in code, and it will use brackets to jump between blocks of code. So if you have, and we'll write some code and see how that works. But yeah, if you have brackets that are delineating code, it will use the brackets as its separators, not just line breaks. And then lastly, to get to the beginning and ends of lines, of course, if you have a full keyboard like I do, you have the home and end keys, which work just fine. But if you don't have those, don't worry, because there are two really special characters that Vim users need to get very familiar with, the $ and the caret, which represent the end and beginning of lines, respectively. So if I press Shift and then 4 to get the $, it takes me to the end of the line. And then Shift 6 takes me to the beginning of the line, right? So the $ and the caret are definitely ones to know. It's a good stopping point for questions, because we've just covered a lot of information just on navigating. So are there any questions so far? You can also use 0 to go all the way to the beginning of the line regardless of any text. That's true, yes. There's like, that's the cool thing about Vim, but also it can be confusing at the beginning. There are a lot of different ways to do things. Was it ampersand? So the two characters, right? So the $ and the caret are the beginning and the end. Or sorry, the end and the beginning of lines. So $ for the end, caret for the beginning. Okay. With that, we're going to quit Vim for the first time. We'll reopen it quickly, but learning how to quit Vim is really important, and it brings us into command mode. We actually saw command mode being mentioned when we first opened Vim, and we saw that kind of splash page. What we want to do is we want to use the colon key to enter commands. Orbital, thank you so much for the subscription for Control Byte. Really appreciate that. Orbital continues just flipping out subs. So if we press the colon key, right, we get a colon. I'm going to turn the keyboard overlay off for a moment. We get this colon down at the bottom of the screen. And this allows us to enter commands. We're going to enter just one single letter, Q, and press enter. Now it yells at us. It says no write since last change, which is why very often the first thing you were taught about quitting Vim is colon Q and an exclamation point. In this case, the exclamation point means force quit, basically. Quit even though I know I didn't make any changes. So colon Q exclamation point, and then you're out of here. You're back to your command prompt. That is how you basically exit Vim, but there are a couple of special circumstances that we're going to learn about. Now, keep in mind, we just lost all that Jeffsum, right? We'll have to go back and get some more, but that's okay. So that's command mode. We're going to learn a little bit more about how command mode works in a second. So let's go ahead and open up Vim again, but this time let's give it a file name. Let's give it the file name of jeff.txt, just so that we have a text file that we can work with. Right? So now it tells us that we're working with a new file in here, right? Jeff.txt. It's empty, but we have it. And the reason we want that file name is so that we can easily save the file later. It doesn't take any extra information to save once we have that. All right, so let's go back and get some Jeffsum. I'm going to go ahead and enter insert mode with I. Put that keyboard overlay back on. Now I'm in insert mode, and I do Control-Shift-V to paste that stuff in. Okay, now I want to save my work. I have this lovely Jeff Goldblum gold here, and I want to save it. So to do that, I have to enter command mode again to write the buffer to the file. And to do so, as the write might suggest, to save, we're going to do colon and then W. No backslash, sorry, that was a typo. So colon and W. Press enter, and now I have saved my work. That's it. So now if I quit, notice if I do colon Q this time without the exclamation point, it won't yell at me because I saved since the last change. So it's like, okay, you know what you're doing. That's fine. Now, if I want to open Jeff.txt again, all my stuff is there. Now, let's say I wanted to add a little bit more to this. Well, I could do that. I'll use the O key down at the bottom of my buffer. Here's some more text. Now, I want to save and quit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press escape to get out of insert mode. Now I can save with W and I can quit with Q. I can also chain those commands together with colon WQ, which saves and quits all in one. One more time, because even though that's really easy, there's an easier way still. There's actually two easier ways still, but the one that I use most often is a different key that does the same thing all together. So I'm going to add even more text. Press escape and colon X. Saves and quits. So if you're working and you want to save your work, the actual way to quit Vim is X. Let's get back in here. Now, I just added a couple of lines here, and I don't really need them. So I'm going to get rid of them. I can get rid of them by using a couple of... I can get rid of things in normal mode without entering insert mode. I can get rid of individual characters with the X key. If I put my cursor over if it's a block cursor, or before if it's a line cursor, and press X to remove individual characters at a time. Not super efficient, but I can do it. Now let's say I wanted to undo that change. That would be U. U is undo, and Control R is redo, but U is undo. That's a really, really important one. Now, I can remove more than one character at a time with that X key. The same way that we use the G key to move to a specific line by putting a number first. So let's say I wanted to get rid of the word even. I know that even is 4 characters long, so I could say 4x, and it gets rid of 4 characters after my cursor. And again, U will undo that. So that's how to get rid of characters on a line or within a line. But what if I want to get rid of a whole line? Easy enough. That's the D key. D for delete. So if I use, much like GG will take me all the way to the top of the page. So DD, two presses of the D key, will delete the current line. And by the way, it actually cuts the line. So does X. It actually cuts it. So you have a built-in clipboard in Vim. And so after you press that DD key, just if you want to see what happens, press the P key for paste, and it comes back, because you've actually cut that line. But DD removes a specific line. Let's undo that. Much like the G movement, right, to go to a specific line, or just like what we did with X to remove individual characters, with DD, you can also give it a number first and delete that many lines below your cursor. So I know that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines here that I want to get rid of. If I do 4 D, D, it gets rid of 4 lines. Now you might think, okay, that's useful, but I don't always have the ability to like count how many lines that I want to get rid of. What if I were doing this in any other text editor, if I were doing this in Word or VS Code or whatever, I would be using my mouse and I would be clicking and dragging or holding the Shift key to select what I want to get rid of. Well, you can do the same thing in Vim. That's what visual mode is all about. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this paragraph here. I was part of something special. All the way to, you really think you can fly that thing? If I enter visual mode with V, now I can use my cursor to select as many characters as I want, and I'm still navigating with the same arrow keys that I was using before. Right? Now in that visual mode, right, I have now selected those things, and if I press, X, it gets rid of what I've selected. D would have worked as well for the lines. Now, visual mode is by character. Shift V is visual line mode, which I often find very useful, because what visual line mode does is it just selects the whole line as I move up and down. It doesn't care about individual characters, right? So if I just press D here, it gets rid of that as well. So visual mode is V, and that's about selecting as many individual characters as I want. And then Shift V, capital V, is visual line mode, and that's for whole lines at a time. Visual mode is really, really interesting. And again, let's say I wanted to take this, I was part of something special. So I'll use Shift V. And because it actually is one whole line, even though there's a word wrap, it's one whole line. And let's say I press D to get rid of it. And now, let's say I wanted to paste it down at the bottom. All I'd have to do is move my cursor down. And remember, D cuts into the clipboard. So if I press P, there it is. Any questions so far, or anything that you'd like to see again? It's a lot of keys to remember. What I recommend doing is checking out I didn't choose one because there are so many of them. But what I recommend doing is looking up something like a Vim cheat sheet. And what you're going to find, images work well. Something like this. Oh, that's pretty tiny. To help out. And what you're going to find out is that you start using some of these at a time. And you'll get really comfortable using some of these. You'll use I and O and X or D. You'll use some of them. You'll get really comfortable with them, and then you'll be ready to learn new ones, right? It's not like you have to memorize all of these things to be functional in Vim. The things that you need to remember most just to be at all functional is I for insert mode, escape to get out, and then :Q. What's the atomic number for visual mode? Oh, it does kind of look like the periodic table, doesn't it? That's like where Einsteinium is, right? Down in those new elements. But yeah, I would start with basically I and O. And work from there, D and X. For a long time, I was pretty much just using I and the arrow keys and escape to, enter text. And then eventually I got comfortable with that and learned how to do some other stuff. It is definitely sort of a building process to get fluent in Vim, but once you are, you really, really can start flying. Okay. We've talked a little bit about the command mode and also getting help, and we've mentioned a couple of commands already. So I want to show you how to find help on anything that you want to get help with. So in command mode, there we go, :H, and then let's say for insert mode. Now I'm going to get this window that opens above my existing window that tells me about how insert mode works. So I've gotten the help for that command. Now, here's the thing. This is another buffer in Vim. Notice that I still have jeff.txt down at the bottom here. So it's like I've just split my window, is really what has happened. So to close the help, since I'm in this file, I'm going to run :Q to quit it out. Now I have my regular file back. Let's do that again with a different one. Let's do H for W for writing. Right, so actually W was moving so many words forward, right, for the W key. Let's try that again. So if I do H and then :W, now it tells me what write does. Right, it says write the whole buffer to the current file, and it gives you some other things you can do with it, but that's the basic idea. And again, once I have this help open and I'm ready to close it, :Q will close that and get me back to my regular editor. All right, we've entered some commands here. There's one command that isn't a single word that I really want you to know, which is set NU, or if we tab autocomplete it, it's set number. Because set NU or set number will enable line numbers, and it's just really handy. As a matter of fact, in our Vim config, I would recommend even setting that as part of your default config, which we'll do a little bit later. Yes, you can also shorten it to SENU. You're one of those people, Neon, I can tell, who like uses single letters to do Cisco switch commands. Nobody else knows what you're doing, but it works because there are no other commands that use those letters. Where'd you go, Jeffsum? That's annoying. There we go. Okay. So set NU or set number, or SENU if you're cool like Neon. Will give you the line numbers, and this is where you can really use 6 GG takes me down to line 6, and it makes sense because I have the line number there. Really, really handy. Okay. Talked about help. Okay, so we did do cut, but we didn't actually do copy. Let's talk about copy. So copy is a little bit interesting because, again, Vim has its own clipboard setup. If you're a desktop Linux user, there is a way to get your Vim clipboard to play ball with your desktop environment's clipboard. There is a way to do that, but that's kind of like outside the scope of what we're doing here. So basically when we're copying and pasting here, when we're doing this stuff inside of Vim, it's not like that clipboard is available to you in the rest of the terminal once you're outside of Vim. Okay? It's really built into Vim. That's one reason why I use tmux as well, which is so we can use the tmux editor, or the tmux copy paste on top of Vim so that we have it in the terminal session, regardless of whether we're in the editor. Yeah, it's very much like the tmux copy paste, but within, right, tmux, right, should be running for your whole session, whereas Vim, you might close and open again. But so to copy rather than cut, let's see how we do that. Let's do that for God Creates Dinosaurs up here. So I'll use visual mode to select what I want to copy. I'll highlight all the way through God Creates Dinosaurs, and then I'll use the Y key to yank. They're at least mostly mnemonic, so Y for yank is like copy. So now if I move all the way down here to the bottom, and I'll move to the end of my buffer, I can use the P key, and that will paste at the end of the buffer. By the way, one thing that's really, really handy is that if I use the right square bracket key and then P, it will paste below. Or actually, sorry, Shift P in this case. Nope, I don't have another line, so that's not going to work. But if I did, so let's add another line, right? And then if I'm at the end of this, and then here, dash P, man, that's really just not working for me at all. Oh, it's because I don't have a line break. Oh, well. But anyway, yank and paste. Now, if I copied a whole line, let's do that. Y, by the way, just like GG does large things, or DD does things for an entire line, Y will yank an entire line. So now, if I come down to line 12, and then do P, it pastes it below, because it's a whole other line. If I do that right bracket P, should do the same thing. I don't know why that's being weird, but the right, I want you to know that the right bracket and then P for paste gets things below the line that you're on. And similarly, the left bracket and then P will put things above. And that's how I move things around on a list all the time. Like if I make a list of things in Markdown, that's how I would do it. Okay. So we've done copy, we've done cut, we've done paste. Right, and don't forget that if I do an X for removing something, and then P, see how it's pasting it like in the next position? But Shift P puts it before the cursor. So X will cut an individual character, or if I do right visual mode and then X, and then I'll paste this down here, I've gotten just those characters. So I have the ability to cut and paste just as fluently as I do in other text editors, but it just takes some getting used to. All right. Now for the next section, I want to actually use a different bit of sample text. So let's go ahead and quit or save and quit your Jeffsum buffer. And I'm actually, this is going to be cool because I want to show you another important transfer tool. Oh no, never mind. Just kidding. I forgot what I was doing. I thought in an earlier version of this plan, we were going to search through the entire text of the book Moby Dick by Herman Melville. But then I had a better idea. But what you will need is to clone a Git repository, which is an important thing, which you've already done if you have the challenges on your VM. But what I want you to do is go ahead and clone, let me get over to it, Daniel Miessler's sec lists. This is and if, especially for the security folks, an invaluable resource. Go away, keyboard overlay. An invaluable resource of lists of stuff that you will use in your security work. Whether you're blue team or red team or whatever you're doing, this repository has stuff that you're going to want to have access to. So go ahead and get this URL. I'll toss it in chat. Doesn't look like it's showing up on the screen because I guess the chat thing is lagging, but it's definitely in chat in Twitch. And what we're going to do is we're going to clone this down. So to do that, we would run git clone. Oh, you're seeing it? Wonderful. Git clone and that URL. It doesn't take too long to download, but it's not the smallest repository in the world. Once you're done, you'll see that you have a seclists folder. And we'll go and cd into seclists just so we can see what's in here. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and we'll play with some of them. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go into the passwords folder. And this is just a bunch of lists of passwords. Now, I want to get a pretty good size list, but I don't want to get one that's too gigantic. So I want to list these out with their file sizes, and I want to list the file sizes out in a way that makes sense to regular people. To do that, I'm going to do ls-l and for the long format of the listing, and then ls-lh for human. What human does is it humanizes the file sizes. So you see, instead of giving me just byte counts here, it tells me that like this text file is 40 megabytes, which is part of the reason why the whole thing is 750 megs. As a matter of fact, the RockU password list, which is pretty famous, is in here as well. It's in the leaked databases subfolder here. So I prefer using the seclist folder for most of my fuzzing and password cracking just because it has RockU in there anyway. All right, so I have a lot of different lists in here. Some of these are gigantic. Let's take a look at the Dark Web 2017 Top 10,000. This is a fun list. The Dark Web 2017 Top 10,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to just Vim that file. Okay, so we're looking at a list of passwords. They're alphabetized. And if we, page through them, we can learn a little bit about what we have going on. But we might want to learn some more. And we might want to search for things in particular. So we might want to see if there's a specific password that's in here. To do that, this is the kind of file that I was thinking about when I got the keyboard overlay. We're going to use the search function. The search function is incredibly powerful. And to search, we just use the /. And then we're going to search for a pattern. Let's just look for the pattern password. Now, one gets highlighted, that's handy, but let's just press enter here. And we found one. Obviously, our cursor went to the first one. Now in search mode, right, if we press N, we get taken to the next instance of the result, the next discovery of that pattern. N, again, and by the way, P will take us to the Shift N, sorry, will take us to the previous discovery. So N moves forward, Shift N moves back. Right, so obviously the word password shows up a bunch here, of course. Not that surprising. Let's get all the way up to the top of the list here. And by the way, let's turn on line numbers, just so we have the line numbers available to us. Now you might think, or you might wonder, like, how can you see the count of how many things, how many examples there are, or how many results there are? To do that, we have to do that in a slightly different way. It's not just a /. We have to use the substitute command. I know that doesn't sound like searching, but bear with me for a second. If we want to find how many instances of the word password there are in the buffer, try this with me. We're going to do %s/password, and then we're going to replace / again, and then / again, and then an n. We'll explain everything that command is doing in just a second, but try that with me. So %s /password / n. And that gives us 47 matches on 47 lines. Now, it might seem like I just invoked some sort of arcane spell. Like, what in the world was that? But there was a lot going on there. This makes a lot of sense once you know it. You just have to learn it first. The % sends the entire buffer into the command that you're running. So we're working with the entirety of the buffer in this case, as opposed to an individual line or a selection or whatever else. That's the whole buffer. S is for substitute. And what we're looking at here is a syntax that you'll also see in other command line tools like sed for finding and replacing things. What we're looking at between these / is the thing to search for, in this case, the word password. After that would be the thing to replace the word password with, which in this case, we're not replacing it with anything, so that's blank. And then after that last / are any optional flags that we have for the searching. And so the n is a cool flag that just counts the number of results. It doesn't perform any substitutions. And so it's like a dry run, basically. And with this, we get a count of how many results there are of our search. Now, this %s is really, really fun because we can use it also to do a few other things with, is it case sensitive? In this particular case, Angel, it is. That's a really good question. If I want it to be case insensitive, I would also give it the I flag. So we had 47 results last time. Let's try it this time. Now there's 53. That was an awesome question. Yep. So the I flag makes it case insensitive. Oh, we have a raid. Welcome, iWang crew, or iWang. We are learning the Vim text editor. So enjoy. Now, let's use the substitution the way that it was intended to be used, which is to replace things. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace every instance of the word password with the word I suck. Just cuz. Okay? So %s, and we're going to replace password with I suck. And then G. G actually doesn't matter so much in this particular case, but G means do the substitution for every discovery, every instance that you find on the line. Everyone needs some Vim pain. We are taking the pain out of Vim. G for global, but global is what's important to know for global is that it's line based, Angel. So what it means, it's going, because we're sending the whole buffer, it's going to be doing this search on every line anyway. But let's say I had like password on a line. The first instance would be replaced, but the second one wouldn't. The G makes it so that both instances get replaced. And if I need to do a demo of that, I can. But so this will just make sure that everything gets changed. 47 substitutions. And that was because, right, we did it case sensitive. Let's undo that. And then let's press the colon key again, and the up arrow will bring back the last command, just like in the shell. And we'll give it the case insensitive flag as well. And now we should see 53 substitutions. Indeed we do. All right. So the find and replace is really, really, really powerful. I do that all the time. As a matter of fact, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a couple of samples and show you how that might work. Yeah, let's take some of these. So I'm going to use visual line mode, and just take the first 25 of these. And I'm going to yank them. And then I'm going to use the E key, or the E command, to edit a new file. And I'm going to do an absolute or a relative path to my home directory, pws.txt. So I'm naming a new file in my home directory called pws.txt. Or actually, just kidding. Let's call it creds.txt, and you'll see why in a second. So I have a new file now. I'm no longer editing that dark code password list. I'm now working with a new buffer, which is creds.txt. But I still have what I yanked in my clipboard. So if I press P, I have those, and I can get at them. Let's get rid of that other line. Now let's say I wanted to create a user list. I'm going to just create a placeholder for the word user here. But I want to, at the beginning of every line, put the word user and then a colon. To do that, I have to replace the beginning of the line with the word user and a colon. So again, we're going to do that %s. And this is where that beginning of the line character comes in real handy. We're going to replace the beginning of the line with user colon. And we can do G, but it shouldn't matter because we're going to do it for the whole buffer. And sure enough, now I get user colon across the entire file. Let's do that again because that was fast. So again, what I'm doing is I'm using the %sign to work against the entire file, the entire buffer. S for substitute. And then what am I looking for? The caret represents the beginning of the line. We're replacing whatever's at the beginning with the characters user and then a colon. And then that's it. We don't need global because we're only doing that once per line. And we don't need case insensitive because line beginnings are not cased. So once we run this command, we put one of those at the beginning of every line. Now this might seem a little contrived, but imagine if I wanted to make a CSV. So instead of doing that, what if I did %s, well, let's replace the beginning of the beginning of the line with a user comma, right? And then let's replace the end of the line with a comma and other data, whatever the third column happens to be. All of a sudden, now I have a CSV file that I can use for whatever kind of work that I need to do. This might seem a little contrived, but I have found that it's actually faster to use Vim to work through CSV files this way than it is working in a spreadsheet editor like Excel or LibreOffice Calc. While we're on the topic of things you can do with the whole buffer, let's also talk about sending things to shell commands. So let's say I had this CSV. How do we get back to the password file? So if let's write this out. If we wanted to get back to the password file, we don't at the moment, we don't have two open files. I haven't talked about how to do that, but we can. If we wanted to get back to the password file, we would do E, and then since we're in the home, we would do dark code top 10,000 because we're in the seclist's password folder right now. That's where our working directory was. We would just E and open that up. Right now we're back to the passwords folder, the passwords file. And notice that I have tab autocompletion in here as well. But we are, I promise you, it's like the next thing is how to, can we talk about buffers? Yes, good point. We can load those up as well. Absolutely right. Yeah, really good call. I always forget about buffers, to be honest with you, Neon. That is something that you can do, right? You can choose one of these. So we want to go back to credits.txt, right? That's pretty cool. Let's say that let's say I had this file, right? But I only wanted the password out of it. One of the things that we can do is we can send the buffer, the whole buffer, to a shell command, and the result of the shell command can become the new buffer. What we do for that is %sign again, but then the exclamation point or the bang, and then the command that we want to use. So in this case, let's just use sort. So what I did was I sent the whole buffer to sort, which would sort these things alphabetically, right? Which it did based on just how it read through. And then returned the result as my new buffer. Really, really, really handy. But then let's say, let me show you an example of something I use this for all the time. I'll often have like rando text that I've copied and pasted. Actually, let me see if I can get some as an example. We'll do that in just a minute. Let's do the easy version first. So let's say I just want the password from this. I just want the password. So I want this center column. Well, I have a command called cut that allows me to select a field based on a delimiter. I could use awk2, nerds. Yes, I could use awk, but I'm going to use cut. And to do that, cut takes basically two arguments, a delimiter, which in this case is going to be a comma, and then a field number, which in this case would be 2, the second field, and that's what it will return. So if I want to just get the password in here, I would do send this to cut-d, comma for the delimiter, and -f2, and now I just have the password. Now, could I have done a really complicated substitution with regular expressions? Yes, but this was a lot faster, I think, just because I had that tool available to me. And remember back to the last week's session, we talked a little bit about how the Unix philosophy was about, making tools that do one thing and one thing well, and then making tools that work well together, and then text being the universal interface. This is, I think, one of the best examples of that working exactly as intended, right? Because we can use all these command line tools along with our text editor to manipulate text and get exactly the result that we want. So Vim has a lot of functionality built in, but it can also utilize the functionality that we have in the rest of the operating system. All right, let's quit out of this one. And let me show you another example of that. Let me go back to my home folder. And let's go get just some random stuff from the internet. I need a table. Does anyone have any suggestions? Oh, wait, no, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Woo! Perfect. What's up, GoPro? Good to see you. All right, so the Phillies are not doing great. Well, they're doing better after the like right before the All-Star break, and now they're doing okay. They're not going to be awesome, but anyway, this is a perfect example of the kind of data that I'm talking about, where I might want to just copy pasta this into Vim, but then I might have to do some cleanup on it. Oh my god, does Google not let me copy this out? Oh, you monsters. Let's just do, yeah, let's do National League standings. Let's go. Come on, MLB. Give me a table. Thank you. Did I just miss the NL East? No, there it is. Okay. So I've just copied a bunch of these rows. This is obviously going to go poorly, but that's the point, right? Where we can use Vim to clean up what we're working with. So Vim standings.txt, and then we'll Control-Shift-V to just paste that in raw. Okay, so obviously this is ugly, right? And we have arbitrary number of spaces between all of these things. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to standardize the number of spaces between my columns. To do that, I'm going to use that %! to send the whole buffer to the trim command. And trim has this option of squash-s, and I'm going to squash any instance of a space to be a single space. Basically, that's what it does. If it finds that character and it finds repeats of it, it just leaves one of them. Oh no, do I have tabs? I do have tabs. Well, there's a solution for that too. So the first thing then I need to do is get rid of tabs. Luckily, we know how to do substitutions. So I'll do our %s, and then tab is a special character. Let me put that keyboard overlay back. Tab is a special character, which we represent with a \t. See, it found some. And we're going to replace it with a space, and we're going to do that globally. This one we definitely need the global because it's going to find more than one. Awesome. That looks a little bit better. Now, we'll send that to tr-s to squash spaces. It looks like it was already set. And now, yes, I have a couple of repeat lines, which I can clean up. Now, let's say that this one actually comes up with an interesting pattern. If I wanted to remove every line that begins with a letter, I could do it with a single command. The G command, the global command, gives me access to do things globally across the buffer. But I'm doing a search just like I would do a substitution. And what I'm going to be looking for is this is regular expressions, which if you learn regular expressions, your Vim power multiplies because you can do all your substitutions, your finds with regular expressions. So I'm going to look for anything that begins with the beginning of the line and then a word, right? Whatever that happens to be. And then with anything that has that pattern, that has a word character at the beginning of the line, I'm going to delete that line. Oh no! I guess it took some of these as well. If I want to be a little bit more specific, I could use A to Z. And that just takes those rows. And now I have a schedule. And if I wanted to, you know, select it even more, or I want to add commas, right? I could replace spaces with commas. Now I have a CSV of the schedule. So I can change the shape of data very, very quickly with Vim. Any questions so far? I know that that was a lot, but I want to make sure that we're pausing as we go for any questions that arise and invite them. You can always shout them out, but I want to make sure I'm specifically taking time to elicit them. We're actually coming to kind of the finale here, which is the really kind of cool stuff you can do with managing Vim once you've gotten the basics down. So let's go ahead and quit this. We don't need the standings here. Let's go back to our creds. All right, so we have this creds.txt, but let's say that I wanted to open up another window or another tab. I wanted to have both that and my Jeffsum that we got earlier. By the way, for those of you who came in late, I cannot let you go without you learning about Jeffsum.com, which is the lorem ipsum. It's the superior lorem ipsum that uses only quotes from Jeff Goldblum. So yes, as GoPro was saying, we have tab E, or I like tab new, right? But tab edit, right, will open up jeff.txt, and now I have tabs. Let's close that, just so you can see that again. So tab new will just open a brand new tab. But if I want to do tab edit or tab E, and then give it a file name, it'll open up that file in another tab. Let me get that keyboard overlay going. Now, I can use command mode to navigate between those tabs. I can go tab previous and tab next to get forward and backward. But I can also use the G keys. Clevola, thank you so much for the follow. I can also use the G keys to move back and forward. So GT, lowercase t, cycles forwards through my tabs, and G capital T cycles backwards through my tabs. So let's open up one more, right? So tab edit, or tab E, and we'll do checklists, passwords, dark code. Let's do come on, I want darkcode.txt. Oh, thank you so much. Glad you saw them on YouTube, and welcome to Twitch. So now I have 3 tabs open, right? So if I do GT, I'm cycling forwards. And then if I do G Shift T, I'm cycling backwards between them, right? I can also give it a number, just like we saw with lines. So if I went 0 GT, it takes me directly to that one. Or if I do, 2 GT, yeah, that'll work out as well. I don't have like enough open that it makes a lot of sense, but it definitely does work. So that's a great way to cycle between tabs. So tabs are great. I don't know how many you have in your browser, but I know I have too many. Let's go ahead and close one of these though. That's like level 1, having a bunch of tabs open. But let's say you're really ready to go into hacker mode, right? You're ready for a bunch of different windows open at the same time. You want that whole interface going. Do I intend to take on Range Force's Persistence Challenge? Yeah, sure do. That's what Saturday is all about. We're gonna knock that out on Saturday. Is there a screen keys equivalent for Windows besides the keyboard overlay? So I think there is, but I have no idea how to set it up, to be honest with you, GoPro. This is the one that I found for Streamlabs. Mr. Crumbs, thank you so much for the follow. Right, so if we want to do more than one window, there are window commands, but to be honest with you, I don't know what the window commands are for in command mode. I know the keyboard shortcuts for them, so I'm going to show those to you first. Control W and V will do a vertical split of your screen. Control W and S will do a horizontal split of your screen. So let's try that. Let's do a vertical split. Control W and S. Wow, that was not what I wanted to do. I want to do the opposite. Control W and V gives us the vertical split. So now it'll duplicate the buffer on the other side. You can see, let's turn off that keyboard overlay. I have the same buffer and I've got this like dotted line separating them, and I'm getting a little bit more visual cue here as to what's going on. And you can see that one of these is slightly grayer. SP and VSP, yeah, that's right. Split and vertical split. Yep, you're right. You can see that I have this kind of cue as to which one has focus. To navigate between them, I have window, right? But I also have Control W and then the arrow keys, the H, J, K, L keys that we were using before will also work to navigate between windows. So I just press Control W. L now brings me over to the second buffer, the second window. So Control W, H brings me back over here. So Control W, L, I'm back over on this side, and then I can edit, let's edit Jeff.text over here. So now I have two different buffers open, and I can look at them in the same time, and Control W, H, Control W, L allows me to navigate back and forth between them. Let's open up one more. So over in my right-hand side, I'm going to do Control W and S, and now I have created a horizontal split, and you can kind of see how this gets busy quickly, right? Where I'm up in this buffer, Control WJ brings me down here, Control WH brings me over here. Let's edit seclists, passwords, common credentials, top 100. Yeah. So now I have three different text files open. And yes, I can use the yank and D and X to cut, copy, and paste amongst all of them if I want to. It's been a while since I've had to have multiple Vim buffers up like this, but it can come in handy, especially when you're doing code review or something like that. And then again, Q will close it all out. And that's very much, if you think back to how we saw what help does, right? Right, you can see that it's creating those windows the exact same way. So, just quick recap. Tab new, or tab edit. We also have tab close and a few others, right? Tab first, tab last, tab move. Lots of other commands in there that are available to open new tabs. And then for Windows, right, as Neon says, SP would be a horizontal split of the window. Also Control W and S does the same thing. And SP, oops, just kidding. VSP does the vertical split. And we use the Control W and then H and L to move between them. And friends, I know this is a lot. I know there's a lot to learn when it comes to Vim. Guess what? This is recorded, so you can go back and review this as many times as you want. Hopefully you found a note-taking system that works for you. This is a course, right? We're trying to do this as a free course. It's not just a stream necessarily. So hopefully you are taking notes, or you found some way to review and repeat what we've done here, practice, and get that knowledge. I'm glad, Angel, because I know that you were coming with some trepidation. I'm glad you're excited about it. It definitely does take practice, but it is absolutely, I think, worth the investment of time. All right, last piece for the evening. How to multiply your Vim power, how to make it work for the kinds of files that you tend to work with and work the way that you want. This is where plugins come in, and vimrc. So there are lots of different Vim plugins that are available to you, and different Vim plugin managers that are available. The first thing I'm going to show you is where to find Vim plugins. That would be vimawesome.com. There are other databases, I presume, but this is the one that has never failed me at all. And they're listed by popularity, but you can also search. So let's say I wanted to look for one for Rust, or I wanted to look for one for Markdown. That's a really popular one, right? I can find all of these different plugins. And NerdTree is a great one. NerdTree is a file browser built into Vim. It creates like a sort of sidebar. So let's click on NerdTree. You'll see here that there are a bunch of different ways to install it, depending on your Vim plugin manager, Bundle, NeoBundle, whatever. I use Vim Plug. I don't know, it's just the one that I started using. It's easy enough to get started with. Right, so how would you do that then? How does this work? Well, let's install Vim Plug in our lab VM. Let's do that together. We'll just search for Vim Plug and see what we got. Right, it takes us to a GitHub repository, and I'll toss that in chat. Really, really easy to get going here. So we just copy this command. You can look at it, what it's doing, right? We're curling, we're getting the plug.vim, and we're doing create dirs for the Vim plug. So this is how we get started here. So I'll go back to my lab machine and copy that command. Okay. And then that's kind of it at first. But I also have to do a couple things in my... There's a file that we haven't talked about yet that your Vim configuration will use in your home directory. It may not exist yet. Let's look for it. Yeah, see, there's a .vim folder, but there's no vimrc. See how there's this .bashrc? This has all the preferences for your user profile for your shell, the shell that we're using right now, which is called bash. And vimrc is a file that can set up all of your configurations for Vim. For example, let's make one, right? vim.vimrc. So we're going to do vim.vimrc just to edit, to create our new vimrc file. And don't forget that we're in our home folder. And then we're just going to do, at the very top, we're going to go into insert mode, and we're going to type set nu. And we're going to save and quit with X. Now, let's reopen vimrc. Notice that now the line number is set. And that's because set nu is part of our vimrc, right? So now we have the ability to set up these preferences for the way that Vim works. Now with this vimrc, any file that I load, vimjeff.txt, the numbers are going to get set because I've set that preference already in that configuration file. Now, the rest of what we need to do is for Vim plug. Do you have to source it like bash? Yeah, you do. In just a second, you will. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of lines from this Vim plug repository to our Vim RC. So let's get this first one. And we'll copy the comments as well, which are written in quotes. Also, hey Gromit, good to see you. So let's Vim our Vim RC again. And let's just go ahead and paste in the call plug begin, right? And these are the different plugins that it has set up kind of as a default. We're not going to copy these ourselves, but we are going to get the call plug end. Okay. And then inside of here, we would put any of the plugins that we want. Now, I have a bunch that I use personally. But, you know, theming is one of them. But the nerd tree is definitely one of them. So let's just put nerd tree in here just to show you what it does. So we're going to copy plug, screw loose nerd tree. We're going to put that in between our plug begin and plug end, right? We're going to write to save that file. And then it says run the following in Vim, source, and then the buffer. So this is where that comes from, right? Source and then the buffer. So we're sourcing that way. And then we have new commands like plug install. And now Vim plug is taking care of our plugins for us. All right, so it looks like it's done. It opens this window for us. And now that it's done, we can quit. And then let's quit out of this and let's just open up jeff.txt. Now, nothing looks different, but in my commands now, I have the nerd tree command. And now I have this file browser over here, which I can use to open up different files. So I have a file browser now built into Vim. Let's do one more. There's my Vim RC. I'm looking for, there we go. The color schemes. So one that you might want to try, I'll put this in chat, is getting the color schemes. And again, we write it, we source the buffer, and then we would do plug install. That'll go get the color schemes. And then we're done. Let's go edit jeff.text now with our E command. And let's go, we have the color scheme command. I like Dracula, which apparently I can't do. I ran into this before. Color scheme midnight. That works pretty well too. There's a bunch of them, and you can look them up, right? You can look up the color schemes to see what's available to you. Midnight is the one you see me using, like if I have my Kali box open. That's that color scheme. It's the one I use across all my text editors. But yeah. So now you have a color scheme, and you now have the ability to add plugins for whatever you need. There are a few that I use. Yeah, I can just like tab through these and see all of them. There's a bunch, right? Really, really a large list of color schemes that I have available to me. But that is how we handle plugins for Vim to make it more useful for us. A few that I would strongly recommend exploring would be things like Vim Surround, which helps you do commenting and uncommenting. Fugitive is just a bunch of syntax autocompletion. You Complete Me is a really powerful completion engine for syntax. And another one that I would use is the Nerdtree Git plugin, which has extra stuff for Git repositories. And then lastly, if you do a bunch of stuff with Markdown, I would recommend Vim Pencil, because what this will do is it will give you a little bit more power with Markdown and also make it easier to navigate lines. With Pencil enabled, it'll treat word wrap line breaks as line breaks, so you can use the arrow keys or J and K the way you would expect, rather than like accidentally going down a bunch more lines than you thought you were going to. But yeah, play with Vim Awesome and look at some of the options there. Look at some of the most popular ones. All these are good, right? For whatever you want. And then eventually you'll get your Vim kind of working the way that you want. And obviously for a server, right, especially for a VM that you might spin up and spin down, not all of this is necessary, but a couple plugins might be helpful, or just configurations in the vimrc that would really help you out. For example, one that I would really recommend is like tabs are a bit of a pain. You see how far over that tab went? Right? That was nuts. So one thing that I might do in my vimrc is, in addition to setting the number lines on, I might set TS equal to 4, which sets my tab spacing to 4 spaces. So when I press the tab key, now it's 4 spaces, not 8, which is a little bit saner. And no, they're not tabs. They're actually spaces. Pressing the tab key generates spaces for all of you space tab nerds. All right. I think that we have come to the end of our tour of Vim. We did it, everybody. Congratulations. So hopefully this gave you a good starting point with using Vim, and most importantly, when you have to or choose to use Vim, when you're on a Linux machine or a Mac or wherever else you are, you have occasion to use Vim, you won't be afraid of it, right? You'll understand how to enter insert mode, how to get out of insert mode, modify the text that you need to modify, and then quit and save your work in a way that makes sense to you. And then eventually you'll be able to leverage more and more capabilities of the editor to make your work a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient. You're quite welcome. I have Vim is my secret weapon at work. I'm not kidding. Whether I'm looking at credential dumps or whether I'm looking through logs or whatever it is, Vim does so much for me that makes my work more efficient just because I've learned some of these tricks along the way. And so with any luck, you'll have the same experience once you get up and running with it. So, you have this recording, it's on YouTube as well if it's past the 2 weeks for Twitch. So feel free to, review as many times as you need. Come join our Discord. We'll be happy to answer questions as you start exploring. But I think that's going to do it for now. And we are ready to close out this episode of Hack Summer. But don't miss next week, because I know that some of you are studying for certifications. And we're going to be covering basic networking next time. So we're going to be talking about IP addresses. We're going to be talking about subnets. We're going to be talking about DNS. We're going to be talking about how computers talk to each other. And if you are studying for a certification that involves some of those things, like the Security Plus or the Network Plus, you won't want to miss next week's Hack Summer, because it really will be a solid foundation on not just networking in general, but how Linux networking works. Yes, we will be talking about the OSI model and the TCP/IP model. All right, so that about does it for this time. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'll be back on Saturday doing blue team stuff. We're going to be doing the Range Force Persistence Challenge, so feel free to hang out for that. Let's see if there's anybody else streaming right now. Cyber insecurity, but they're okay. You know what? Go where you want. But until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Please stay safe out there. Oh, 0x chance of streaming? All right, we'll send you there. Wear masks. And I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.